Welcome to episode 198 of the Low Blow on SouthwestFight.com and MyMMANews.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. We are live. If there are any technical difficulties, we apologize in advance. We're trying to do this live again. Trying to work out the kinks. By next week, everything should be worked out. How's it going, Jorge?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back live. It kind of feels weird, even though it's not really that different from what we normally do.
Yeah, man. It's good just to be back on a more interactive scale with our fans and our listeners. On today's show, lots to talk about. We're off a week. We're back. We're to break down the breaking news of Nick Diaz re-signing a deal with the UFC unexpectedly. We'll discuss that in full. We'll also run down all the news. I mean, we have a lot of news to talk about. Alexander Gustafsson is out. Daniel Cormier is in. We'll discuss Mike Tyson to present Evander Holyfield into the Boxing Hall of Fame. We'll run down all the events, all the UFC fight nights, of course. We'll break down Canelo versus Lara. And we'll preview a big weekend of action featuring Golovkin. And, of course, in my opinion, what could be the fight of the year, Matt Brown versus Robbie Lawler. But first, as housekeeping notes, you can always get in touch with the show through email, through lowblow505@gmail.com. Plus, we're available on Twitter, through @TheLowBlow. Also on Facebook, facebook.com/Low Blow Podcast. Also available on YouTube, youtube.com/LowBlow505. And, of course, we're available on Stitcher, as always. And now we're available on Spreaker, as well as on iTunes. Before I walked in the door, I'm coming home from work, the leading news item was going to be Daniel Cormier getting the title shot at John Jones at UFC 178. But instead, Nick Diaz has really stolen his thunder, and now the top news story is Nick Diaz signing a 3-fight deal with the UFC. You can see the pictures on Dana White's, Twitter here. Basically, there's a couple of stories here. It's a 2-fight bout agreement. I saw 3 fights, I believe, on the Bleacher Report. I might be wrong about that. Ariel Helwani has a tweet saying that, this is his quote from Ariel Helwani, got an update on the status of Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz coming shortly to MMA Fighting. Also, there's going to be some other news about which weight class he's going to fight in, but we really don't know. But right now, he's just signing this bout agreement. So as it seems to me, Nick Diaz, you know how he is. I mean, if he doesn't get what he wants, he won't talk to Dana White. So it seems to me that he's fighting Anderson Silva. There's really no other fight he wants unless it's George St. Pierre again. Either George St. Pierre's coming out of retirement or he's fighting Anderson in the near future. This is late-breaking news. What are your thoughts on this, Jorge? What does this do for the UFC? And again, with Bleacher Report, I saw 2015. If you have any more details, please bring them to the table. But what's your opinion of this? Do you think Nick Diaz is still interested in fighting?
I got as much, news as you actually do out of that. It's kind of a mystery of why it's until 2015. Not sure if Diaz needs to get back in fighting shape or what it actually is. But I think it's good for the UFC. They need this guy to actually start some drama. Many people have felt that there's been too much, thinning of the UFC with all of these events going on. So by adding a guy like Diaz into the twist, it's going to be great. And why not? I think a great comeback fight for Anderson Silva would be to fight this guy that not everyone likes. Of course, most people do like Anderson Silva because he's arguably one of the 2-3 best fighters of all time. So I'm actually happy that he's back.
Me too. It's really interesting now because you take a look at the buy rates for, I believe, UFC 158. That pay-per-view did really well. That card was also loaded, had a ton of great fights on it. But the main event was Nick Diaz versus Anderson, was against George St. Pierre. Excuse me. What do you think this guy's mindset is? I mean, he's probably one of the most, bizarre, unique. Any other adjective you can describe this guy is pretty much it. Really, fight I've ever seen. I can't really tell what's his mindset. I mean, when he gets in the cage, we know how he is. Just because he signed a contract doesn't mean he's going to get in the cage and fight. I'm sure when he fights Anderson Silva, we're going to hear the drama of him not showing up to the press conference, the weigh-in, the drug test. There's several obstacles that we usually take for granted that with Nick Diaz it's not a guarantee. So I'm not sure what exactly to expect. Even though Nick Diaz has officially signed his contract, until he's actually in the octagon half naked. I'm not really exactly sure to expect until he gets in there in the bell rings.
I'll believe it when I see it, just like you. You just don't know what is going to come out of him. And what if he is, Jay, what if it's taking this long until 2015 just so that he can take fighting extremely serious again? Not to say that he didn't before, but what if he just comes back and we see the best Nick Diaz ever, and this break just turned out to be like the greatest thing in the world for him? How crazy would that be?
We'll see. I mean, right now it's open. George St. Pierre's not in the division. I mean, honestly, if he beats Anderson Silva by proxy and by his drawing power, he's probably the number one contender in the welterweight division, or hell, even in the middleweight division. Easily, he fights Chris Weidman. I think that fight happens pretty easily. Or he probably leapfrogs. Sadly, this might end up hurting either Robbie Lawler or Matt Brown, depending on what Nick Diaz wants to do. And honestly, he's so unpredictable. One of those guys might get screwed in the process. So we'll have to wait and see what happens on there. But it's definitely, some good news for the UFC. They're going to need it, especially what happened earlier this week as we segue to Alexander Gustafsson being injured. Daniel Cormier takes his place to fight John Jones, UFC 178. Cormier obviously very excited, already made some tweets about this fight. What's your basic feeling about this, Jorge? Because to me, in terms of a money fight, Daniel Cormier versus John Jones, I think, brings in more fans compared to Gustafsson. It's so weird. It seemed like the MMA media was kind of forcing this kind of hype between Gustafsson and John Jones when no one watched the first bout. And plus, John Jones is not really that big of a draw according to the pay-per-view numbers. But with Daniel Cormier, this is a guy, again, that John Jones, really does not like. Chael Sonnen, there was more he saw as kind of beneath him. But Daniel Cormier, he really does not like this guy from the beginning. What are your thoughts on this bout, Jorge? And also, as a box office draw, these guys will be sure to talk some trash.
Definitely will, and they already are. And what's crazy is that both guys' daughters are the ones talking trash for their behalf. So when it comes to trash talking, this is just as intense as it's going to get with MMA. This is as intense as it'll get without a Nick Diaz in the mix. If Nick Diaz were to just jump randomly into this and start hyping it up by talking smack about both guys, that's the only way this smack talk could get any bigger, I think.
Triple threat, man.
Yeah, triple threat match. That would be insane. And Diaz is just crazy enough to take it.
Maybe. Yeah. He reminds me a lot of BJ Penn. I don't think, at least BJ Penn was willing to, go through the procedures. But he has a lot of BJ Penn in him, and I'm surprised those two aren't really compared with each other.
Yeah. And Jay, one thing, we were spoiled with either fight. Gustafsson and Jones was so good that I can't see, unless there was a crazy game plan that Greg Jackson put in for the second fight for Jones, I don't see how that could have really been a boring fight compared to what happened last time. But now, I can't really say that this is the better fight because on paper, Jones and Gustafsson are one of the three greatest technical fights of all time. So I'm just excited. This is a huge fight. To me, DC versus John Jones is one of the top maybe 3 or 5 fights that can be made in all of MMA.
Yeah, it's probably honestly number one. Unless Gina Carano gets signed. But I think, this is the big attraction. They're both very market-friendly. And John Jones has been struggling for some reason to break through to the mainstream audience. This fight can do it. Daniel Cormier is an Olympian. This guy's very marketable. And I think with the trash talk, this might be the fight to finally push John Jones into the edge. Again, the same thing as we talked about with John Dobson and Demetrius Johnson. I think under the table, John Jones, if the fight's successful, he should probably give half the money to Daniel Cormier if the fight's really successful. But Jorge, you have some news about Mike Tyson to present Evander Holyfield into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame.
Correct. As you mentioned, Evander Holyfield, who did have a few fights with Mike Tyson in both men's Hall of Fame career, and the infamous bite fight between the two where Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield not once but twice during the middle of their fight. Just surprising that he would choose someone like that, but it just goes to show that the compassion that both guys have one another to forgive and also get over it. So, again, Tyson will deliver the presentation of the speech, hand Holyfield his trophy for the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. It's been 17 years since that fight, Jay.
Wow.
Did you watch that fight live?
I got a funny story about that fight.
Okay.
So my parents, it was a hard childhood for me because they didn't believe in getting a cable box. So wrestling and boxing, we didn't have a cable box. But with Comcast, I guess at the time, whatever cable provider it was.
Jones Intercable.
Yeah. It was you can hear, when you go up to the cable stations, you see the color bars kind of, and you see it's hard to describe, you see the lines moving back and forth.
Jay, I got the description. Scrambled porn.
It was scrambled, but scrambled boxing. So I can hear the audio.
Yeah.
I can't see any of the video. So we're watching it, the scrambled vision, because my dad wanted to at least know what's going on. And I hear like this commotion. We thought somebody got shot in the ring. Like, we thought it was serious. Like, what is going on here? It was just so bizarre. It kind of see the fight 2 to 3 years later, but right there, it was so dramatic. Like, I think we heard something about biting somebody. We couldn't make out every half a word, but that's totally it's ghetto vision as you can get. But it was such a weird, bizarre thing. And then ESPN would post the pictures on SportsCenter. You couldn't see the whole video. It just made it so much more dramatic at that time. Compared to, I couldn't imagine that happening on Twitter. Just all the memes and it's all like the vines. I mean, it would be a fiasco nowadays.
And we actually watched it here. I shouldn't say here. I actually watched it at my house when I was younger. I can't believe, 17 years ago. How old was I? Was that
We're old, man.
Was that fourth grade? Fourth grade, something like that. But I remember betting my brother $3 on that fight. I had Holyfield. He picked Mike Tyson, and I obviously won. But during the whole commotion, I told him he just bit his ear. I'm not going to pay you if he wins. I clearly remember that, man. That was crazy. But it's good to see that the two guys have gone over it. Mike Tyson obviously has fought some demons over the past years, has gone through a loss of a child, so definitely done a lot of growing up and maturing. And now both guys are older gentlemen, and yeah, they're presenting one another into the Hall of Fame. So it's a great thing to see, and it's a great thing to boxing to kind of close that chapter of the ugly history of modern boxing.
He's the most fascinating. It's weird because you see him on all these talk shows, and they kind of treat him as a joke, But if you get somebody with him that knows boxing, he's probably one of the most fascinating athletes in sports. I mean, he's honest. And he's a historian. He's very knowledgeable, not only of boxing, but pro wrestling, too. I mean, not just, like, WWF stuff, but, like, old, like, territory. Like, this guy, encyclopedia knowledge. And I think, his persona and just things in the media kind of overshadow really how really smart and honest this guy is. I mean, I'm not trying to make this guy as a hero, but in terms of you want an honest response, Mike Tyson's probably going to tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. Moving on. Vitor Belfort, it looks like he's going to fight Chris Weidman. And it looks like he's going to fight in Nevada. The Nevada State Athletic Commission has granted a license to Vitor Belfort to fight the champion Chris Weidman. Interesting. There's a couple of conditions here. First, the fight will not take place before December. The second condition is that the fight has to take place in Nevada. And the third was that Vitor will have to be subject to any drug testing that the commission consider reasonable. So take that as you may. I mean, that could be one drug test. That could mean 30 drug tests. Excuse me. Excuse me again. As you may know, that he already failed a drug test February 7th, and that's what he got in trouble for. Basically, I'll read you the quote a little bit further down here. Quote, I want to prove to the commission that I'm a great fighter who follows the rules. I promise I will not fight anywhere else before I fight in Nevada. I promise you guys. So, this is pretty much a big news scenario here, because I was wondering, what's the big fight for December? And I guess, if you correct me if I'm wrong, Jorge, but the Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez fight got moved to December too. I thought that fight's going to be in January, but I guess it's being moved to the December card as well. So, all of a sudden, that December card looks spectacular. And previously, I thought that December card was going to be terrible because there was no main events. But now, it's turned out to be probably going to be the best card of the year.
Well, as far as I'm aware, that's the only real, official fight so far. I think you're right about Pettis and Melendez being on that. I don't know I assume they signed, but I never heard anything really official. But yeah, you're right about. I'll shell out $60 just to see these two fights. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, me too. It's a great main event and co-main event, and hopefully everything goes right. You know how it goes, man. We're in July, so a lot can happen between now and then. Hopefully, all four guys stays healthy, and we can see this mega event in December.
Yeah, from one old guy to another here, meaning Belfort, of course. Our boy, Roy Jones Jr., will continue to fight, Jay. He'll return to the ring this weekend when he takes on Britain's Courtney Fry in Riga, Latvia. If I gave you a map, would you be able to come within 500 miles of where Latvia is?
The only guess I would have is right next to Dr. Doom's, whatever. Dr. Doom had his own island. Right by there. That's probably my only guess. But other than that, probably not.
Oh, man. That was a pretty good. But it's near Lithuania. And if you don't know where Lithuania is, it's right just south of Finland and bordering Russia, Jay, just to let you know where Latvia is. So that's pretty out there. So no specifics as to what the mid to late 90s legend actually, is actually getting paid for this. But for him to still be fighting in 2014, it's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable. But Jones, who refuses to call his quits now, he was quoted as saying, "You do think about it, and it's hard to leave when you still got it. I know I still got it," he continued. "I'm very much looking forward to going to Latvia." Well, good luck, man.
It's just bizarre. I mean, I don't think he needs the money. I'm pretty sure HBO is paying him. It's just, I don't know. This is what kind of hurts the sport of boxing, and I think it hurts MMA too. The same. I mean, you see fighters, Dan Severn. Look at him. I mean, it's just Jens Pulver. He retired recently. I mean, all these guys that won't hang quits for one reason or another. It really damages both sports.
And Jay, I want to mention one thing.
Sure.
Even hardcore fans, I bet 98% of hardcore fans don't realize that Roy Jones Jr. has won his last 3 fights. I mean, yeah, they were against younger up-and-comers. Let's go ahead and go over where they took place. His last fight in December of 2013 took place in Russia. Before that, in June, it took place in Poland. Before that, December of 2011, he fought in Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia, not the country, Atlanta, Georgia. So it looks like he's fighting once a year. So, I mean, if he can preserve his body and still continue winning, no one's going to be able to talk him into retiring.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, he's winning all the fights. There's no reason to. And honestly, with boxing, I mean, it sounds good. You say he has a 3-fight winning streak? I mean,
3-fight.
He wins again, that's 4. I mean, honestly, I'm sure he can probably weasel his way into a title fight somehow.
At the weight class, you never know. Let me pull up that cruiserweight weight class, actually, and see if there's anything of interest. Juan Pablo Hernandez, Marco Huck. Okay, it's not too loaded of a division, so, why the hell not?
Yeah.
Why the hell not?
I mean, I think if anything, it's a good name to get those guys over. So.
Yeah, definitely.
One last news item, at least from my part, Chael Sonnen handed a 2-year suspension for his drug test. No monetary penalty, as you guys well know. Caught for drugs including HGH and EPO. Pretty much he retired from the sport. And I also want him to really contribute to educating others from using drugs again. Here's a quote from him. He said, "I am guilty, I am ashamed, and I have no intention to put up a defense." So obviously, he's caught and it's over. I don't know. It's a sad situation, but interestingly enough, again, I bring up pro wrestling, but it's linked. I bet you, Jorge, 6 months from now, he'll be either 3 scenarios: with Bellator, with the WWE, or with TNA Wrestling. One of those 3.
And why not? If he can make his money doing that, and I think more of the money might be in the pro wrestling gig, to be honest.
Yeah, he's very personable. I just think, WWE straying more from like the 30-year-old guys, and they're moving towards more of a younger generation. So with Chael Sonnen, he's such a personality that I think he'd be more in the commentary role, which he has experience in, more in kind of the managerial role, but certainly not in the ring. I just think he's too banged up and just an older guy having to learn all the the ins and outs of pro wrestling inside the ring. I think that's too much.
Yeah. And Jay, I got one more really big local note that made headlines a few months ago.
Sure.
Las Cruces, I don't know if you remember this, but the Las Cruces MMA fighter who was being charged for killing one of 4 gentlemen who actually invaded his home back on New Year's Day, Joe Torres, he will not face charges.
Oh, wow.
So the district attorney's office there in Las Cruces did mention that the evidence in the case does not exist to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Joseph Torres killed Sal Garces without legal justification. Of course, this is kind of like a, defending yourself in your own home. He did stab the guy to death, but yet, 4 guys came, threatened him, tried to jump him, and Joe Torres, an MMA fighter there from Las Cruces, did what many of us felt was right. He had to defend himself, whether it was, that situation is kill or be killed, to be honest, when it does come to that, and there are weapons involved such as that. So, in my opinion, rightfully so, he will not be charged.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's move on to 2 rounds. We've been off for a week. 2 rounds is our segment where we pretty much have a rant or have a point of discussion on whatever is being discussed in combat sports. What's on your mind this week, Jorge, in terms of we've been gone for a week, so you have anything saved up?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll touch base on this, but there are reports that if we are, I don't think that we had this planned for this week, but there are reports that Gina Carano is pretty damn close to signing for a title fight against Ronda Rousey.
Really?
It's just too soon for that title fight. You're basically throwing her to the wolves. Jay, 2008, I think something like March 2008, if I'm not, or something like that, was the last time she actually won a fight.
Yeah.
Someone, I can't remember who tweeted earlier, but the last time Gina Carano won a fight, I don't even think Obama was actually in office.
You're probably right.
It's just unbelievable. And to me, if you feel she's that good, if you've seen her in training, and you think she's that good, I mean, she lost her last fight, Jay. Yeah. I mean, let's think about it. If it were a fighter still fighting right now, not too many fighters would get a title fight if they had lost their previous fight, unless their name is Chael Sonnen. That's the only way it's ever happened in recent history, of course. So to me, it's the entertainment business, though.
If you don't mind, can you delve into the specific developments? I've been gone, so in terms of the media scrums, I caught bits and pieces, but I heard that they're closer to negotiating with her. Has there been any new kind of developments with this week? And I heard that Holly Holmes, she's cool with Carano getting that first title shot, but have you heard any more news from that end?
Besides that, I haven't really. It was just a lot of reporters sourcing certain people, and it was on Twitter where they actually mentioned this.
Gotcha.
That that it's possible that Ronda Rousey's close to that, or that Gina Carano is close to that fight, and it's likely going to be on, guess what, that New Year's card.
You're exactly right. And I'll take it a step further. This fight should not be licensed, in my opinion. We don't know. There's several questions. We don't know. Number one, I mean, how long she hasn't fought? Let's see, 2008. Do the math. 2008 to 10, 2 years. 2010. Wow, that's 6 years, I think. 5 to 6 years. That's insane. So number one, the layoff. Number two, she's never shown an example to make the weight to 135 compared to at least Cyborg, who's been fighting and cutting weight. At least it's possible if she gets off the steroids. At least it's conceivable somehow. So we don't know if she can cut the weight. And also, you're right, Jorge, she lost her last fight. And not only lost her last fight, but got finished in the first round, even though she was decently competitive. So there's several issues here. I think from a marketing standpoint, I understand what they're doing. It makes sense. But from just to make sure this fight even goes off, I don't think it's worth it. I'd rather have her lose, honestly, to like a Miesha Tate or a Kat Zingano or Sarah McMahon or somebody. I'd rather have her, miss weight for one of those fights or have her get beat in one of those fights rather than immediately fight Ronda Rousey. I mean, you imagine this fight gets all the media attention and Gina Carano can't make the weight. I mean, in a way, it's unfair to Gina, who has to cut this weight. She's been doing movies. She hasn't been in the fighting mode. I just think her being in shape to fight is just a monumental task in itself, let alone beating this Olympic killer in Ronda Rousey. I think this is too much to ask for. And if they're really serious about Gina Carano, they would have her at least do the Holly Holm thing. You know, at least fight. And I know people are like, oh, put the fight together. But honestly, the same thing goes for Cyborg. If you don't know if she can make the weight, I mean, to me, she needs to at least fight somebody before she gets a title shot.
I completely agree with you. But, I mean, if they're thinking financial business, I mean, why the hell not sign her to maybe a 1-2 fight deal, and you know you're getting your money's worth out of her by doing it and putting that big of a fight together.
I mean, it's 50-50. She can't make the weight on the scale. How embarrassing that's going to be. There's no title fight, and somehow Gina Carano lands a lucky punch and knocks Ronda out. It's not for the title, and so that's a huge disaster on your hands, and that's conceivable. So I don't know. I think I like Gina Carano in terms of when she was fighting. I think she's a lot more talented than what people gave her credit for.
I agree.
At the same time, it's 5 or 6 years later, and there's this killer at the top of the division. And I think you have a lot of other deserving ladies. I think even though the division's kind of shallow, that if you were serious, I think you can kind of patent her record in order to get the title shot. I think that was the thing with Crow Cop. That they didn't do. They gave him, I forgot what this guy's name was when Crow Cop got into UFC. It was Eddie Martinez or something like that. Probably screwed that name up, but he beat him in a rather boring fight. And then he fought Gato Gonzaga, who's a real contender. But to me, if you're going to have her fight 2 fights, have her fight 2 tomato cans, and then have her fight Ronda. I'd rather see that. I'd be okay with that. Her fighting 2 girls that weren't up to snuff and then getting the title shot, that makes sense. But her just getting an automatic title shot. I feel very nervous about what's going to happen.
Holy crap, Jay. You took it back. UFC 67, Eddie Sanchez, February 3rd, 2007.
Okay, yeah, okay. That was a horrendous fight.
It was a horrendous fight. And then he got knocked out by Gabriel Gonzaga the next fight, if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember that fight in England because they were hyping. It was supposed to be Randy Couture versus Mirko Crow Cup. That's why Randy Couture was out there. And then the rest is history with the Gabriel Gonzaga getting that title shot. I wasted my 2 rounds, so we're going to move on because I really want to talk about Conor McGregor. In Ireland, with Fight Pass, you have Fight Pass, Jorge. Did you see this event at all?
I watched the main event, and that's it. I was actually out of town. I was out traveling southern New Mexico during the event. Actually, when I did get back, first thing I did was watch McGregor brand out. The crowd was unbelievable, Jay. It was about 9,000 people. It sounded like 30,000. It was just unbelievable. The atmosphere was incredible. Those are some passionate fans. I don't even think necessarily MMA fans. They're just passionate sports fans. And Conor McGregor, I don't know. To me, he was impressive, obviously, against a highly outmatched and outclassed Diego Brandao. But McGregor, I saw a lot of technical flaws that a great technical fighter would expose in him. Nonetheless, it didn't take anything from the event. He did what the crowd wanted him to do and finish Diego Brandao, and he did it so early in the fight in round 1.
Yeah, I think the UFC's been looking for more stars, especially in that featherweight division. I mean, it's just that featherweight and bantamweight division has been hit with some of the worst luck with the injuries, with just the fight cancellations, the delays. And I think Conor McGregor, even you can question how good he is, but the guy can talk a good game.
He can.
Me, I think this is I don't know what he's paid to next, but honestly, I would almost put him kind of ahead in the line and almost have him fight Cub Swanson, to be honest, and just see what he's got, because really that division needs a lot more star power. And I think, I can imagine the trash talk between Cub Swanson and Conor McGregor, and you're right, Jorge, in terms of the style matchup, I can see kind of Cub Swanson picking this guy apart and exposing him.
How fair would that be to Cub, though? Cub, a lot of us have felt has deserved a title fight for his last 2 fights.
Well,
and
what's going to happen with Jose Aldo? Wasn't he picked to fight Chad Mendes? So right. So honestly, this whole thing. Who knows when that fight's going to be put together? This is the next best possible scenario, in my opinion, until Jose Aldo's available. Is it how it is sitting on the bench for so long, waiting for that title match that doesn't ultimately happen? That's the problem that Gustafson's going to have. If John Jones and Daniel Cormier have a knockdown, drag-out fight, people forget about Gustafsson, and the rematch happens. With Aldo and Chad Mendes, if Mendes wins, then what does Cub Swanson do? He has to take another fight, maybe 2 other fights before he gets a title shot. So when when there's ever injuries involved, it usually just ruins things. And I think for Cub Swanson, unfortunately, he's going to have to take another fight.
I think Dustin beats him before he gets anywhere. Dustin Poirier, I think, will get to Conor McGregor. If not, give him one hell of a fight, to be honest.
I was so high on Dustin Poirier, and then just some of his losses kind of turned me off to him. I think it's possible. I think if he's impressive against Dustin Poirier, because I still think that Poirier is a great fighter, I think then we'll know for sure that McGregor is in that elite class. But I don't know. I think I would favor McGregor in that fight, but it wouldn't surprise me if Poirier pulls off the win there.
And that's on that big September 27th card with Jones Cormier, so another good fight on that card.
Yep, agreed. If you don't mind, let's shift to boxing. And a fight we haven't discussed. When I was in Vegas this last week, the posters were still up for Canelo versus Erislandy Lara. Kind of a controversial fight in terms of kind of how the fight went. Alvarez won on 2 scorecards, pulled out the narrow decision. The fight cards were 115, 113, 117, 111. The third judge had Lara head 115, 113, and the Associated Press scored the fight a draw at 114, 114. From what happened here, Canelo had the quotes of you don't win by running, you win by hitting, you don't win a fight like that, unquote. Here's another quote from him. I wanted to leave a good taste in my mouth with my fans. I came to fight, he came to run. And when a reporter questioned Lara about his tactics, Lara got very offended. Really seemed very put off that the reporter suggested that Lara was running. Can you describe this fight, Jorge? I think we talked about this off air, that this is a style clash between two fighters with two distinctly different styles. Do you think this kind of hurts Lara here? Because Canelo's a huge star, and honestly, if the benefit of the doubt is going to go to one fighter, it's going to go to Alvarez, not Lara.
I completely agree with you. And, that's something that I mentioned, that the fights that I would feel that Lara won the fight and Alvarez would be given the contest. Those were the exact words the last time we actually spoke on this on air on the show. It was a close fight. I think it could have gone either way. I believe I had it 115, 113 in favor of Lara, with two rounds being very close. So 115, 113 Alvarez, I will not argue about. The 117, 111 score that the New Mexico judge had, typically a great judge, just befuddled a lot of us, including Erislandy Lara's manager, who did speak about it at the post-fight on the podium and gave examples of where that same judge scored the fights for boxers over brawlers every time in very close matchups. So, I don't know. It's just one of those things where the superstar is going to get that, and typically it is a style matchup, but it was just kind of strange that the judge that usually goes for the technical fighter had it so wide. When I heard the score, I said, Lara won this fight. There's no way, Canelo won 9 of the 12 rounds, and I was damned. I was, just shocked that a judge would score it that much in favor of Canelo.
Yeah. What does this fight do for Canelo now? I think he's already fought Floyd, and I think from the indication from this fight, since it was so technical, it doesn't seem like he's ready for a rematch with him. So, obviously the fight that you mentioned was the Cotto match, right? How close is that to happening?
Well, it's not very close, just because Cotto is sort of a free agent, and he he did fight on the same network, but it's going to take a lot of negotiations for Cotto to accept this. Cotto is not going to, take the lower pay in that type of fight, and I don't know if Golden Boy is willing to do that, but they're going to have to if they want that fight. They're going to have to give something up. So that would be the next fight for him. I would love to see a rematch with him and Lara, but the fight, to be honest, Jay, it wasn't a very thrilling and exciting fight. Lara, I would say, gave away 2.5, maybe 3 rounds in that contest by, I don't necessarily want to call it running because he did box a little, but there were a lot of times where he was moving around the ring without throwing a single punch. It was just as easy as that. He gave away 3 rounds, and you can't do that. So because Canelo did win and was named the winner, he can pretty much do what he wants. He can fight Lara again if he wants. He can fight anyone else, but the next logical fight, if you want a superstar, it's going to be Miguel Cotto.
Let's move on and let's discuss real quickly This took place actually last Wednesday. Donald Cerrone knocking out Jim Miller impressively. From the reports of this fight, he finished him twice. A head kick finishes with Jim Miller, round 2, 3:31, and Donald Cerrone is on a roll, man. I mean, this whole card seems very spectacular from the results here. You take a look, the Barbosa-Dunham fight, Edson Barbosa wins by TKO. A bunch of TKO finishes. This is a spectacular card, but the main event, I think you're seeing Donald Cerrone come into his own. Because of this, dramatic finish and domination over Jim Miller, do you see Cerrone possibly fighting Vincent Henderson? I mean, Henderson right now is kind of on an island by himself until this whole lightweight championship, picture gets settled here. Do you see him fighting him, or maybe fighting maybe a Nate Diaz rematch if Nate Diaz can kind of get out of this mental funk he's in, or maybe a Josh Thompson fight? What's next for Donald Cerrone? And of course, go over what your thoughts of him finishing Jim Miller.
If Nate Diaz can get his stuff together, I think that would be a good fight for him, just to kind of redeem himself in that type of contest. But it's just, man, I don't necessarily know if Henderson would be the next guy. I mean, I would have loved to obviously see him and Khabib, but it's unfortunate that Khabib did get hurt.
That's right.
Henderson, if I'm not mistaken, has a contest in October scheduled. Am I right about that?
Let me check.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got Dos Anjos lined up. Yeah, next month. August 23, he has Rafael Dos Anjos lined up for a fight there at UFC Fight Night. So we have to see what happens there. Do you think Henderson, with the win, I think with the win, he deserves the next title shot, to be honest, in that weight class?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the way the Pettis fight went the first time, he got beaten so quickly. And you know how it is, a fighter getting, another fight against a competitor that he's lost to twice. I mean, he lost to him in an epic match at WC 53 and then lost to him at 164. That's 2 straight losses. And Benson Henderson's not a star. And I just see, to me, Donald Cerrone has that star power. Nate Diaz, Josh Thompson. There's other guys kind of up on the ladder there. And heaven forbid if the match between Pettis and Melendez is any good to worthy a rematch. I mean, Benson Henderson, he's kind of in that Rich Franklin spot where he possibly needs to look at moving up a weight class, I think. I mentioned it again, his star power is just not that good, and I think that's going to be the main factor preventing him from not getting a title shot, sadly. If you don't mind, also, let's shift to the fights coming up this weekend. First, in my opinion, looks like a dynamite card. Bobby Green versus Josh Thompson, Dennis Bermudez versus Clay Guida, Anthony Rumble Johnson against Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and Matt Brown versus Robbie Lawler. In my opinion, could be a fight of the year. And I might be overstating this. Maybe it's just me being too excited. And you know how it is, hyperbole and just getting too excited. I mean, we do that all the time. But I think this has the opportunity, and not in just skill level, but just in terms of drama and just in terms of telling a story within the fight. Probably one of the top fights in UFC history, with Matt Brown versus Robbie Lawler. Is there a chance this fight might be kind of a snoozer, and particularly because of Matt Brown, just because we've seen so many times when a guy finally gets that big match, they kind of either A, choke under the pressure, or they change up their game plan so much where they don't want to fight how they got there. They want to just do this super complicated game plan, and in the end the fight stinks, and then they end up losing all 5 rounds in a unanimous decision. I mean, is that possible here?
It is possible, but we can't take anything away from Matt Brown. Even though I think Lawler is rightfully a 3-1 favorite, let's not get it twisted. Matt Brown has won like 5 out of his last 6 fights by TKO, I think. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, 6 out of his last 7 by TKO, Jay. That's a 6 streak. I don't know if anyone else in the UFC has, actually had that type of win streak in a really long time.
Yeah. And really, this is a fight that's perfect if Matt Brown just sticks to what he does most. This is a perfect fight for Matt Brown. A guy who comes forward, a guy who doesn't look for the takedown. Robbie Lawler loves to brawl. He's been in so many of these wars. this is perfect for Matt Brown. I mean, this is the best case scenario to me. This is better than a Carlos Condit fight. Robbie Lawler, he's not. I think his boxing's gotten a lot better, but certainly not the most technical guy. And certainly you can drag him into a war, and you can land some punches here. I think 3-1. I think honestly, Matt Brown's a live underdog, and I would probably, honestly, it might be kind of weird, but I'm going to pick Matt Brown in this fight.
Okay, and the only reason I'm thinking I'm leaning toward Robbie Lawler is because of the way he's been able to turn around his career and of who he's fought in his last 3 fights, Jake Ellenberg, okay. Johnny Hendricks and Rory McDonald. Those are, B+, A- fighters right there, if you ask me. So I just think the level of competition that Robbie Lawler has faced the last year and a half
That's a fair point.
is a lot better than Matt Brown. But also, Matt Brown's done what he had to do to his specific competition by knocking them out. So.
Yeah. And I think also, too, with Matt Brown, in my opinion, with this fight, what makes me compelled to pick him is just the style matchup. I think there's no worry about the takedown. There's no worry about the submissions. I mean, it's just a brawl. Who has more heart? They're just going to go in there and just beat the hell out of each other. I mean, that's what I hope what happens here. So, in my opinion, I'm just excited for the fight. I really don't care if I'm right on the prediction or not. I'm just hoping that it is fight of the year. If that does happen, I'll be a happy camper. And let's not forget this co-main event, Anthony Rumble Johnson against Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Anthony Johnson's just been on his killer. The winning streak dominated Phil Davis, surprisingly, at UFC 172. Another guy, if he beats Rodrigo Nogueira, if he fights a contender in that light heavyweight division, that's another guy in line for a title shot. What do you make of Anthony Johnson's kind of career resurgence here? Because like Robbie Lawler, this is another fighter that a lot of people wrote off as being a waste of potential.
I love it. I like that. There aren't a lot of times in not just sports, but in society where you tell somebody, you need to get your crap together. Your life is headed the wrong way. Or, hey, listen, you need to take training a little bit more serious. And then them actually doing it. Usually they go off the other end where they just get involved in different things. But for Anthony Johnson, he's likely turned his life around just because of that fight. The amount of sponsorships, I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure he made tons of money off. A lot more money in sponsorships than he did his last 2 fights, especially. And especially in this fight here. I don't know, I personally see Anthony Johnson ending this fight early, man.
Really?
I do. I see him stopping Antonio Rogerio in the first round. First or second round, I just think ground and pound, game over.
Yeah.
It's going to be ugly, I think.
It's a great showcase fight for him. I think his card's great for Fox.
No, I agree. It definitely is. It's a pretty good card, but, the odds makers, let me take a look right away. One sportsbook has Anthony Johnson as 6-1 favorite and Nogueira a 4-1 underdog. Amazing.
Yeah. Let's move on, and I think one of our favorite fighters on the show, Gennady Golovkin, back in action finally. It's been a while, since February, but he's taken on Daniel Geale. This is for Golovkin's WBA championship at Madison Square Garden. Now, is this actually in the Garden or in the theater?
As far as I know, it's in the Garden.
Okay. Daniel, with Gennady Golovkin, he's been kind of circling, on the cusp of being kind of the superstar. When will we finally see Golovkin kind of take that step? And then, do you think Daniel Geale is kind of that fight to kind of make that bridge? And if you don't mind, just enlighten us a little bit of information about Daniel Geale.
With regards to this fight, this is a really good fight that could be made for Golovkin just because of 2 things. I'm going to quickly go through the top 5 guys here ranked by BoxRec in that division. Golovkin 1, Miguel Cotto 2. Miguel just fought, so obviously him and Triple G couldn't fight. Sam Suleiman, who's an Australian, he tends to fight in Australia or in Germany or wherever. And then you got Peter Quillen, who's a Showtime fighter. Yeah. Daniel Geale is number 5 on that list. He is also Australian, so a couple of Australians on that list. Daniel Geale, for people who don't know, was a former champion and defended his belt 4 times before losing a split decision recently. He did bounce back and fight a kind of a younger, I don't necessarily want to call him a journeyman, in Garth Wood in Australia, but it was a bounce back fight nonetheless. But I'm telling you, this has the potential to be a pretty exciting fight, just because Daniel Gill, despite having 2 losses, one to Anthony Mundine way back in 2009, split decision. Gill's 2 losses have been by split decision, Jay. This guy could potentially still be an undefeated fighter. He only has a 50% knockout ratio, but he does not get hurt. I don't think in his career that he's been actually put on the canvas before. So if he gives him hell, this could potentially be a tough fight for Gennady Golovkin, just because of the fact that Daniel Gill is a sturdy chin and he's a former champion himself. So I unfortunately will miss the fight. I'll be covering some local fights here, but this has potential to be one of the better fights in that middleweight division this year.
Yeah. Well, I'll be covering it. Finally, it's good to have HBO and Showtime back. I'll be finally get to see all these fights instead of a terrible live stream on the internet. So I'm looking forward to seeing this, and actually a decent picture quality.
And also on that card, that's actually a decent card. HBO doesn't do that many fights, but the co-main event that evening is actually a pretty good one with Brian Jennings and Mike Perez in that fight as well. So a couple of heavyweights going at it. Not much going on in the heavyweight division, but that's a pretty good matchup, matching 2 undefeated prospects up.
You mentioned 2 things before we say goodbye. One, you mentioned you're covering a local event. That's AAA MMA. That is this coming week, July 26th at the Crown Plaza Hotel. You can please give a little bit of background on that card. Conrad Padilla versus Isaiah Reyes. Is Isaiah Reyes? Is that correct still?
That is correct. That is still the matchup that's going on. A lot of amateur fights on that card, but a lot of the Amis on the card, Jay, are 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. So you're watching the future of New Mexico, and I know the AAA MMA guys are excited of all the young talent that they have. But Conrad Padilla and Isaiah Reyes, Conrad Padilla representing Jackson's MMA, and Isaiah Reyes representing Fit NHB here in Albuquerque. So it's the 2 best gyms in town going at it on that card. So we want to make sure that if you're in the Albuquerque area, to make sure to go check that card out.
And then also one more thing, it's Showbox's, I think, 200th episode, and that's coming up tomorrow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just wanted to kind of, if you don't mind, I know this wasn't on the rundown, but give some background as to kind of the beginnings of Showbox and how you rank it in terms of, USA's Tuesday night fights and, of course, Boxing After Dark and then Friday night fights with ESPN.
Wow, Jay, you took me back with that USA Tuesday night boxings, but it's been a great platform to launch a lot of these younger guys. Anytime you see a Showbox guys and that they consistently be featured in the main event, there's a good chance that they're going to be a potential champion or at least a title challenger. So it's been one of the few consistent television programs for boxing, the last few years. 200 episodes. It's not easy to do, especially for a sport that was supposedly dying, 4 years ago. So Showbox, it's been great to showcase these young fighters. Any guys, usually you'll see guys that are, maybe 10-0, 9-1, 14-1, or something like that. So, guys like Fidel Maldonado actually fought on that type of card. So it'll continue to actually be this platform to develop a lot of these guys and potentially move on to the Saturday night Showtime featured fights, if you will.
Yeah, certainly just a great platform to see some fantastic fights. And sometimes they use that as a precursor to their main cards the next day. So always good to see that, and congratulations to Showtime on an amazing accomplishment. I think that's going to wrap up our show. Jorge, anything else you wanted to add, man?
I don't think so. I think we'll have more information next week. Got some pretty big news for the local scene next week as far as MMA, boxing, and BJJ.
Cool. Yeah, and of course we're getting ready for episode 200, so stay tuned for that. We are live again. Feels good to be back on Spreaker, broadcasting live out to the internet. Again, you can always get in touch with us through social media. That's where we're going to post our live links to the live show. Also, at the Low Blow, Facebook.com/Low Blow Podcast. Through email, lowblow505@gmail.com. And as always, Stitcher, iTunes, and on Spreaker, and also Podomatic. So for Jorge Hernandez, I am Justin Goodrum. You've been listening to episode 198 of The Low Blow on SouthwestFight.com and MyMMANews.com. We will see you next week.
Peace.